Hello, I'm Matthew, and this is how the goldfish became gold. There once lived a fish in a beautiful bay at the foot of a great kingdom. This fish was different from all the others that lived in the bay, for they were tropical fish with scales all the colours of the rainbow which sparkled in the sunlight. But this fish had been born with dull grey scales and was simply known as greyfish. Despite his difference, Greyfish was very popular, for he had a special gift. He was always friendly and smiling and loved to make people laugh. One very hot day, Greyfish swam down to the shallows in the bay to play with the school children who had come to play in the cool water. Greyfish was having a great time splashing in the waves with the children, when suddenly he looked up and noticed that the sun was the only thing that seemed to be unhappy. He looked up at the sun and asked, "Sun, why are you so unhappy?" "I'm just so hot and bored," replied the sun. "It's very hard being up here all day whilst I watch you all enjoying yourselves in the cool waves. I wish I could have a swim in the sea." "You must come and join us and have a swim," replied Greyfish. "Well," thought the sun, "nobody has ever asked me to go for a swim before." "Come on," said Greyfish. "You can if you try." So the sun thought for a while and concentrated very hard, and squirmed and wriggled and pushed with all his might until his great body jolted forwards, burst through the clouds, and fell down, 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 and splashed into the water. The sun felt wonderful as he felt the cool water of the waves, and Greyfish swam around him, flicking water onto his hot body. They were having such a great time that they hadn't noticed that all the children were running out of the water, up the cliff edge and back to the kingdom. "Oh dear," said the sun. "Why are they running away?" "Look," said Greyfish, "it's getting dark, and the children think it's time to go home for their tea." So they both decided that the sun had better return to his home in the sky. So the sun thought, and squirmed, and pushed, but it was no use, for he couldn't budge. He even tried bouncing himself off the seabed to try and break out of the water, but it was no use. The sun was stuck in the sea. He had made a terrible mistake. Without the sun in the sky, the people began to lose track of day and night. A confusion spread over the entire kingdom as it fell into darkness. The children couldn't go to school, the crops in the fields stopped growing, and the fruit on the trees turned rotten. The people were starving and afraid. They turned to their king for help. The king was determined to get his kingdom back into order and called upon the best advisors in the world to help him come up with a plan to get the sun back into the sky. They worked day and night, and all the while Greyfish was asking the king, "Please, let me have a go. I've got an idea." To which the king replied, "Go away, stupid fish, what could you know?" So, after much anticipation, the king announced that they had a plan and set up camp with his advisors on the shore in front of the sun. The people of the kingdom, the children and Greyfish, and all the other fish of the bay gathered to see how the king was going to do it. He called upon the army. They assembled their great cannons filled with gunpowder to blast the sun out of the water. Everyone waited desperately to see, but it was no use. The sun didn't move. He was too heavy. So the king returned to his advisors, and all the while Greyfish was still trying to get his attention. "Let me have a go. I've got an idea."
"Oh, go away, silly fish, what can you do?"
After days of working hard, the king and his advisors came up with another plan. Again, the people of the kingdom, the children, Greyfish, and all the fish of the bay gathered to see the sun get back into the sky. This time, the king called upon the navy. Their huge submarines burrowed down into the sand underneath the sun and tried to propel him out of the water. But it was no use. The sun was just too heavy. He wouldn't move. Back to work the king went, and all the while the grey fish, still trying to get the king to listen. "Please, just let me have a go. I have an idea."
"Oh, get this fish out of my way. What can a little fish do?"
The king had a new plan, and he was sure that this one would work. So the people, the children, and the fish gathered for a third time, now growing desperate and dreary. Even the poor sun was beginning to lose hope as his skin became wrinkled and dull from the water. The king called upon the Air Force, who tied huge ropes around the sun, attached them to their aeroplanes to pull the sun back into the sky. Off they flew, up and out, until the ropes became taut and stretched out and out and out until they snapped. It was no use. The sun was just too heavy. The king lay his head in his hands, and the people began to lose hope, as they could see that the king was out of answers. Greyfish, though, determined, swam forward and shouted, "Please, just let me try. Please, king." The king looked up.
"Oh, all right. It won't make any difference now."
Greyfish immediately sprang into action and swam up to the sun and dived deep down under the waves all the way until he reached just underneath the sun's belly. All the people, children, and fish of the bay stepped forward towards the sun to see what he was doing. Greyfish started to swim back and forth and back and forth with his tail just touching the sun. The sun started to jerk and jolt from side to side. Next, he gave a little eek and a squeal until he started to jiggle and giggle. Well, the sight of the great sun giggling and wriggling in the water made the children laugh. One boy shouted, "Look, the sun is being tickled. He can't help but laugh." This made all the people laugh, and the king even started to giggle. The sun had become so ticklish that he roared out the most infectious, booming laugh from his great body, and after weeks of sadness and misery, the king, the fish, and all the people of the kingdom were bent over with such rib-tickling laughter. More and more the sun roared, but soon he started to dislodge himself from the sand. More and more he cackled, until he burst out of the water and sailed up and up and up through the clouds back to his home in the sky. Everyone rejoiced and cheered as a small circle of light grew across the water and stretched itself all over the kingdom to make a beautiful, bright summer's day. The king was delighted and called out, "Come forward, Greyfish, so we can all thank you." Everyone was so excited. They waited and waited, but Greyfish was nowhere to be seen. A feeling of great concern spread through the crowd until the small boy shouted, "Look, there he is, jumping over the waves. But he's not grey, he's Goldfish." And gold he was, for he had touched the sun, and his scales had turned to a beautiful gold that sparkled all the way up to the sun. All the people, children, and fish of the bay stared in wonder and awe. The king announced that Greyfish should keep the name and would forever be known as the first Goldfish. With that, Goldfish swam back to his tropical friends and family in the bay to show them his beautiful new golden scales.